So you're under the hood, maybe doing some routine maintenance, and then you see it. That slick of oil in your intake manifold that just makes your heart skip a beat. Yeah, it's a classic uh-oh moment for anybody who works on their own car. But hey, before you start pricing out a new engine, just take a breath. We're going to walk through exactly what this means, from the really simple 5-minute fixes all the way to the more serious stuff. All right, so let's get right to it. The big question on your mind is, how much trouble am I in, right? And that's a totally fair question. The truth is, finding oil in your intake can be anything from a minor, kind of normal thing to a symptom of a really serious problem. The good news? We're going to give you the knowledge you need to tell the difference. Here's how we're going to tackle this whole thing. First, we'll figure out what's normal and what's not. How much oil is too much oil? Then we'll dive straight into the number one suspect, which is the PCV system. After that, we'll explore some of the more serious issues like engine blow-by and turbo trouble. And then we'll wrap it all up with a step-by-step diagnostic checklist so you know exactly what to do next. Okay, before we go any further, let's just get one thing straight. Seeing a tiny, tiny bit of oil vapor in your intake doesn't necessarily mean your engine is about to explode. It's actually pretty normal. As engines wear, a little bit of oil mist is just going to happen. So the real question is, where do we draw the line between, it's fine, and Houston, we have a problem? Here's the simple test. Just run your finger inside the intake. If you pull it out and there's just a light, oily film on it, that's probably just normal oil vapor. Nothing to worry about. But if your finger comes out dripping with oil, or you can actually see little puddles forming inside, yeah, that's a red flag. That's your cue to start digging a little deeper. Now, let's talk about the usual suspect. In like 9 out of 10 cases, the culprit behind that oil in your intake is a surprisingly simple and cheap little part, the PCV valve. So before you start having nightmares about a full engine rebuild, let's take a closer look at this little guy. So, what in the world is the PCV system? Well, think of it like your engine's breathing system. As your engine is running, all this pressure builds up inside the crankcase. The PCV system's job is to basically let the engine exhale. It releases that pressure and sends those gases back into the intake to be safely burned off. It's a really simple but totally brilliant piece of engineering. So here's how it's supposed to work, in a perfect world. As that pressure builds up, the PCV valve opens just enough to let the gases escape. But here's the most important part. It's also designed to be a gatekeeper. It's supposed to block the heavier oil droplets from getting sucked through with the air. It's all about letting the pressure out without letting the oil out. Right, so if this little system is designed to prevent this exact problem, how does it end up being the cause of it so often? Well, like any part that's working hard all the time, it can just plain fail. The ways it fails are usually pretty straightforward. Over time, the valve can get all gummed up with sludge and just get stuck open. When that happens, it's like leaving a vacuum cleaner on, just constantly sucking oil vapor straight into your intake. Or the little spring inside can just get old and wear out, and it can't regulate the pressure anymore. Either way, you get the same result: oil where it's not supposed to be. But what if you've already checked or even replaced your PCV valve, and you're still finding puddles of oil in your intake? Well, this is where we have to start considering a more serious possibility: engine blow-by. And this is often a sign that there might be some real internal wear and tear on your engine. Think of blow-by like a leaky pressure cooker. Your piston rings are supposed to create a super tight seal in the cylinder, but when they get worn out, some of those hot, high-pressure gases from combustion can literally blow by the rings and leak into the crankcase. This creates a ton of extra pressure, way more than the PCV system was designed to handle, and it just forces that oily mist right into the intake. The number one cause of blow-by is just worn-out piston rings. It's a natural part of an engine's life cycle, but it's a sure sign that your engine is starting to show its age. Another culprit could be worn valve seals, which can let oil seep down into the cylinders. No matter which one it is, we're definitely talking about a more involved and, let's be honest, more expensive repair than a simple PCV valve. Now, if you've got a turbo or a supercharger under the hood, there's another potential source for all that unwanted oil. So this next part is for all you forced induction fans out there. Your turbo spins at absolutely insane speeds, and it needs your engine's oil to stay lubricated and cool. Now, there are special seals to keep that oil right where it belongs, but if those seals start to fail, oil can get sucked right into the compressor side and get blown straight into your intake. You might find it pooling in your intercooler at first, but it'll definitely make its way to the intake manifold eventually. All right, we're in the home stretch of our diagnostic journey here. Let's really quickly touch on a few of the rarer but still possible causes of oil in your intake manifold. You know, it's not very common, but a failed intake manifold gasket or even a tiny crack in the plastic manifold itself could be the culprit. And of course, there's the simplest explanation of all, just too much oil. If you accidentally overfilled your engine during an oil change, that extra oil can get whipped up by the crankshaft and sucked into the PCV system. These are all long shots for sure, but they're still worth keeping in the back of your mind.
Okay, we've covered pretty much all the possible causes, from the simple and cheap to the serious and not so cheap. Now it's time for the most important part. What do you actually do next? Here's your step-by-step guide to figuring this out.
Start with the easy stuff first, always. Check your PCV valve and the hoses connected to it. It's a super cheap part and usually really easy to replace. Next, pull the dipstick. Check your oil level. Make absolutely sure you didn't overfill it. If you have a turbo, listen for weird noises or look for blue smoke from the exhaust. And if you've done all of that and you're still stumped, then it's probably time to call on the pros. A mechanic can do a compression test that will tell you for sure if you've got a blow-by problem.
So here's the bottom line. If you find oil in your intake manifold, do not immediately assume the worst-case scenario. Your first move should always be to check that PCV system. It is by far the most likely culprit, and it's an easy, cheap fix. Just start simple, and you might just save yourself a whole lot of time, money, and especially worry.
And one last thought to leave you with. Even a simple failed PCV valve can sometimes be a warning sign. As your engine gets older, it's naturally going to produce more blow-by, which puts more and more strain on that little valve. So while you might have solved the immediate problem by replacing it, it's a great reminder that staying on top of your regular maintenance is your absolute best defense. After all, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right?